has been knocked out now. Their missile count is going way down. Amazingly, they're hitting countries that were...
Look what we've done here.
I know.
I almost cried.
Yeah.
I mean, like, how long have we been pushing this?
Well, I mean, you've been pushing this for years, right?
Right, it's here. I talked to Trump this morning.
It's literally...
Oh, he's jacked.
Yeah.
It's the best thing I've ever done. He loves blowing stuff up. So, you know, there are a lot of people inside didn't want to do it. So I've had my challenges.
So the war has calmed down a bit in the Persian Gulf, but it appears to be heating up in the Red Sea and the Caspian Sea. And that's pretty dangerous because it seems like the war is expanding, Ukraine getting involved. This is after Saudi Arabia got involved, all these other countries getting involved. There's possibilities that Britain could get involved. There's threats from Iran against Britain. Later on in today's episode, I will speak in a pair of interviews about the significance of the war expanding to both the Red Sea and the Caspian Sea. I'm Borzu Daragahi. This is Badlands. It's my podcast. You can subscribe at borzu.substack.com. I'm also on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube. If you could, head on over to YouTube and subscribe if you like this, if you're watching it. Hit the like button. That would be awesome. And perhaps even leave a comment or two. Perhaps if you want, you can just insult me. That's okay. I'm used to that as well. This weekend, there was some footage released from a documentary with Lindsey Graham. You saw or heard a little bit of that from the beginning. Lindsey Graham, as you probably know, was this senator. He was a war hawk. He was just, there was like basically no war that the U.S. could get involved in that Lindsey Graham was not in favor of getting involved in. He was part of this group of people, and they're all dead now. Lindsey Graham just died of a heart failure not a few days ago, but he was part of this group. They were called the Three Amigos. They included John McCain, also dead, and Joseph Lieberman, this senator from Connecticut, also dead. And you know, what's crazy is these guys were just such huge advocates of war with Iran. And, you know, this is something that they've been talking about for just ever and ever, and they've been pushing forever and ever. He was, I think, disgusting, perhaps even evil, that they basically had like no regard really for Iranian people. There was just a sort of hatred and evil in his heart for brown people. It's born out of bigotry. He talked about liberating the Iranians. He also talked about liberating the Iraqis. He was also in favor of just every single possible war. He was all about doing the bidding of the neoconservatives. He himself, I don't think he believed in anything. He pretended to be a believer in Christianity, but I think he was just an opportunist and a big, huge war advocate and just loved war and loved killing people, especially brown people. And it just shows that this is basically what the United States empire has come down to. No more ideals, no more ideas, no more talk about democracy. The Three Amigos were famously very much in favor of the surveillance state, especially Joseph Lieberman. There was not a law that would spy further on Americans that he didn't advocate. These guys were very much in favor of like a kind of, I don't know, this just very high-tech warfare, high-tech surveillance. They were really into huge Pentagon spending and so on. And in this documentary, snippets of which have been released, and this documentarist apparently had really interesting access to Lindsey Graham in the run-up to the war. And in this particular clip that I'm about to play for you, he shows just what he wanted for Iran, which was not like liberation. He was hoping for cities to collapse. He was hoping for the country to fall apart. And he was basically so convinced that it was on the verge of happening. Now, when you have like basically cities falling out of the control of the central government, what that is a recipe for civil war, like we saw in Libya, what we saw in Syria. And you could just see in this video clip just how hungry he is, how lustful he is for this to happen and for the country to collapse and for thousands, perhaps millions of people to be killed and displaced.
Able to deliver. Oh, to be honest with you, I think about 3 to 4 weeks we should have them in a spot where they start losing control of some cities. And what we're trying to do is just get a few cities to fall in the next month, get the Arabs more openly involved tomorrow or by the end of the week, and just have almost irreversible momentum.
So how monstrous of a person was Lindsey Graham? He was so monstrous and he was so diabolical in his desire to see war and mayhem and to see American bombs dropped on brown people around the world that even Benjamin Netanyahu had to calm him down a bit at some point, where basically Israel was fighting against Lebanon, destroying alleged Hezbollah positions. Israel had bombed so many sites in Lebanon, including on this day called Black Wednesday, when they killed like 1,000 people in 1 hour. There's just this sort of gruesome attempt on the part of Israel to destroy Lebanon. And Lindsey Graham was all in favor of it. Not only was he in favor of it, he was trying to ask Bibi Netanyahu whether it would be cool if he would lobby Trump to also take part in the destruction of Lebanon and to killing more Lebanese people. Listen to this clip when Benjamin Netanyahu says, you know what, actually, why don't you hold off on that one?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, Bibi, Lindsey.
Hey, Lindsey. How are you?
I'm just so impressed. Glad to be your friend.
I'm glad you are my friend.
I'm going to meet with the president this weekend. I'm going down to Doral. I'm going to try to get him to join with y'all in Lebanon, to maybe fly some with you. Would you like that?
Yeah, I get that. I think you have a point, but I've been thinking about the other side of it for a second. We're concentrating right now on Iran. If we tell Hezbollah that we're going all the way, we threaten them, but if we actually do it, then they have no reason not to go all the way against us. And right now, that's not our interest. We can do it later.
Well, that's actually good counsel. I'll put it out there as an idea. We can always go back to it.
So anyway, you can just see what a warmongering freak he was. Also, just that clip showed what a tool of Benjamin Netanyahu he was, basically acting on behalf of a foreign government. This is sick. This is treasonous. Whatever you think of Israel or Benjamin Netanyahu, it is a foreign country, and he's sitting there getting guidance. This is a U.S. senator, and he's getting guidance for his policy and policy decisions from a foreign leader, a very controversial foreign leader who's despised by the world, indicted by the International Criminal Court as a war criminal. And this guy is very unpopular in the United States as well, really unpopular among American Jews as well, for what it's worth. And meanwhile, Lindsey Graham is like on his knees, essentially filleting this guy like it's his boss. Anyway, this weekend there was a major escalation in Yemen with the Houthis and the Saudis getting into it more and more. This is basically creating havoc in the Red Sea, even as the United States and Iran are appearing to let a quiet peace proposal led by Oman work itself out with a proposal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The things heated up in Yemen with the Houthis and the Bab el-Mandeb, which is another crucial choke point. Already, apparently, the Saudis are trying to get their oil out through the Suez Canal and then through that passageway I discussed in previous episodes through the Cape of Good Hope. And that is a very long way, which effectively blocks oil shipments for another 60 days or so. Anyway, I spoke about this end of the conflict, this part of the conflict, in an interview with India's NewsX World.
Saudi authorities have issued a high-priority emergency alert across the Jazan region. How significant is this use of a national early warning system? And what does it suggest about the level of concern on the ground?
Well, I think that it's clear what has happened. There's video already being disseminated on social media, video footage of the Saudi Aramco facilities on fire, fiery black smoke rising into the night sky. This is more likely than not an attack by Yemen's Houthis, the Iran-aligned group that is in control of northern Yemen. This is in retaliation for those strikes that Saudi Arabia launched against Hodeidah and the Hodeidah area. The Yemeni Houthis claim that Saudi Arabia struck Hodeidah ports, and that is a red line for Yemen because the ports are the key nodes through which supplies are reaching Yemeni people. And in response, it appears that the Yemenis have struck Saudi oil infrastructure. That is potentially catastrophic, even further damaging the already highly under pressure energy markets and oil production facilities in the Gulf and the Middle East.
These are among the most significant Saudi-led coalition strikes since the 2022 truce. Does this signal the collapse collapsed on the relative calm in Yemen between the two? And are we entering a new phase of conflict between the Houthis and between Saudi Arabia after these strikes?
Yeah, I think we are entering a new phase of conflict. It seems like all other considerations, including the peace deal that the Saudis and the Yemenis struck and the fragile arrangement that was in place, are collapsing. I'm not sure what's going on behind the scenes. There doesn't seem to be a lot of mediation efforts going on. There could be some attempts to reassemble the peace deal, but I'm not sure that's going to happen at this point. I think there's just a lot of momentum towards war. And I'm not really certain. It was really Saudi Arabia that started this cycle, and I'm not sure exactly why they did. I wonder if there's some kind of connection to the negotiations with the U.S. and this plan by the U.S. to offer Saudi Arabia nuclear technology. I'm not sure why Saudi Arabia, at this very sensitive moment when its eastern ports are closed by the Iranians and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, why they would jeopardize the exit route of their oil through the Yanbu port and through the Red Sea and through the Bab el-Mandeb by attacking the Houthis at this point and escalating so rapidly. There could be things going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of.
The coalition said it targeted the Houthi military infrastructure while avoiding civilian facilities and keeping key ports open. How important is that distinction, especially under international humanitarian law, in shaping the international reaction to this recent strikes?
Well, Ellie, at this point, it's he said, she said. The Saudis say they did not strike civilian targets. The Houthis said that they did. I wouldn't trust anyone in this situation. I just don't see the interest of any party in escalating it to that extent at this point. Yes, those ports are essential for Yemen's Houthis, and as well as Yemeni ordinary people who have been basically under a blockade for many years. Their food has been very, very limited in getting to the country. There's limited supplies of grain getting there. So damaging that civilian port would have a tremendous humanitarian impact. I'm not sure why the Saudis would do that at this point. Perhaps there's a thinking that they would destabilize the Yemen Houthi rule by making the people angry and hungry, but that didn't work for like the past 11 years. I'm not sure if that plan that didn't work for the past 11 years, why they think that it would now suddenly work again.
Of course. And the strikes come after attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. We obviously know that the Houthis said they will block the very crucial Bab el-Mandeb, especially after the recent strikes. The strikes between the US and Iran has been happening. But how closely are developments in Yemen now linked to the wider regional crisis involving Iran, the maritime security? Are we seeing a point where now the Houthis are getting so involved that this is also going to drag into what's happening between the US and Iran?
Just to correct you, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait is not closed. It's just closed to Saudi ships. So if you're a Hyundai and you're moving your cars through the Bab el-Mandeb, you're cool. If you're Saudi Arabia and you're moving oil through the Bab el-Mandeb, you're not cool. So there's a distinction there. But yes, it does appear that these two conflicts are merging. There was always a connection because the Houthis, although not under the control of the Iranians, they're definitely aligned with the Iranians. They're definitely very much in favor of the Palestinian cause. They're very sympathetic to Hezbollah. And so they might see this as a way of joining the war. Again, though, it's confusing because it doesn't seem to serve the Houthis' interests at this point to enter this war. They might feel like they have no choice. They might feel like perhaps better to enter it on their own terms than be dragged in later by events that are beyond their control.
The Houthis have vowed that retaliation against Saudi interests. What forms could that retaliation take? How vulnerable are Saudi energy infrastructure and commercial shipping routes for them to further attacks?
I mean, go online right now and you can see video footage of what appears to be Saudi Aramco energy facilities on fire as we speak. So I think that shows how vulnerable they are there. And I will also say that many of the interceptors and the missile defense tools that the Americans had given to the Saudis and had placed in the Gulf to protect against these kinds of strikes have been used up by Israel, by the Americans in recent wars. This was part of the Iranian strategy, dump all of their cheap, low-end missiles on Israel and on the Gulf states at the beginning of the war, use up those expensive interceptors and those anti-missile defense systems, the Patriot systems, blow them up, and then all of a sudden, all these facilities become that much more vulnerable. And that's what you're seeing now. You saw it in Jordan when the American barracks were hit, satellite photos showing tremendous damage there. And perhaps you're seeing it now in Saudi Arabia with the Saudi Aramco facilities hit.
Now, the Gulf of Oman is becoming an increasingly active flashpoint alongside the Strait of Hormuz. How does this change the strategic landscape of the conflict now? What are the challenges does it create for international maritime security?
Well, the Gulf of Oman is a much vaster body of water than the Persian Gulf. So I think that it's much harder to track ships there. It's a much more freewheeling area. International waters are much more just massive than in the Persian Gulf. So there's just a different terrain there. Ships turn off their trackers and they could basically get lost at sea. I'm sure there are a lot of ships, once they get past the Strait of Hormuz, who try their luck and try to evade the U.S. blockade. There are also ports along the Iranian coastline in the Gulf of Oman, as well as in Pakistan, multiple ports where oil from Iran could potentially be sent out to market. This is turning into, and this is part of the economic war between the United States and Iran. The Iranians want to hurt the U.S. by damaging oil infrastructure and driving up the price of gas and petroleum and driving down equity markets. And the Americans are trying to damage the Iranian economy by preventing them from getting their crucial exports out to sea and out to market. There was also another escalation, this time in the Caspian Sea, with a Ukrainian missile targeting an Iranian ship in the Caspian. There was one fatality in that attack and a lot of threats on the part of the Iranians to retaliate against Ukraine. That would be wild, because you already have a situation where Russia and Ukraine are at war, and Iran has been supporting Russia in that conflict. They're kind of military partners, and to expand the war in this particular way would really put the world on the edge of something like World War III. Anyway, I discussed this a little bit in an interview with India's NewsX World.
How credible are Iran's claims of being neutral in the Russia-Ukraine war, given continued Western allegations that Iranian-designed weapons are being used by Russian forces? It's also good to note, yesterday there was reports that Romania had to get their jets in the sky and to shoot down an Iranian drone that was hovering over their airspace.
Yeah, I think they're not very credible. Iran has been helping out Russia for years in the Ukraine war. That include the supply of Shahed drones in the early months of the war, and they proved very effective against Ukrainian forces. And basically, they have been in a military partnership, and Iran has been helping Russia out. And meanwhile, Russia has been helping Iran out. They've actually taken those Iranian Shahed drones, modified them, and sent them back to Iran for use against Americans and other forces in the region. So it's not very credible to say that the Iranians and the Russians aren't aligned. They're absolutely aligned. Right now, the Iranians are trying to step back from that original involvement with the Russians. They see that it is a little bit high risk to get involved in a war that is so threatening to Europe. But for a long time, they were definitely on the side of the Russian belligerents in that conflict.
Could the latest diplomatic row between Iran and Ukraine over what happened in the Caspian Sea incident further damage any remaining channels of communication between the two countries? They were already slightly strained, but do you think this is now going to just take it over the edge?
Well, the relationship between Ukraine and Iran has been strained since 2020. That's when Iranians shot down a Ukrainian passenger jet that was departing from Tehran airport. It was an accident, but there was still a cover-up of the incident. There was a lot of bad behavior on the part of Iranians after that accident. Viewers may recall that incident in which many civilians died in a Ukrainian Airways crash that happened minutes after takeoff from Tehran's international airport. So there's been tough and bad blood between the two countries. And that, I think, will definitely strain those relations. I think that the greater danger at this point is that the Caspian, which has been relatively quiet in this stage of the conflict, most of the fighting has been in the Persian Gulf. There's a real danger that the Caspian Sea and the countries that are adjacent to the Caspian Sea, including like oil-rich Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan, these kind of very important energy-rich countries, could be also drawn into that conflict.
And what impact could Iran's repeated calls for diplomacy have on its broader international image, do you think? Particularly as it faces accusations of supporting Russia's war efforts.
Well, I think it can't hurt their diplomatic image. I think that a lot of people in the West, a lot of diplomats that I've spoken to, they see the diplomatic track is one track that Iran pursues. And they also see this very aggressive military track that Iran pursues. And they question how much of which part of that is real, which is the more dominant force, the diplomatic entreaties or the drone strikes and the attacks and so on. And there have been, there's been speculation now in the media that Iran could directly target Ukraine with its ballistic missiles. They are in range of Ukraine. And so that would be pretty extraordinary and dramatic. So I think that it's basically the Iranian strategy to, on the one hand, talk diplomacy, on the other hand, do military action, and do them both at the same time.
With this situation here, with obviously the Houthis and Saudi Arabia, Ansar Allah claims it struck key Aramco facilities with missiles and drones, while Saudi Arabia says its incoming threats were intercepted. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen contradicting statements when it comes to conflict, but how difficult is it to independently verify claims made by both sides during a conflict like this?
Yeah, it is quite difficult, and especially since there's so much censorship. A night earlier, we did see images of fiery attacks and successful attacks on Aramco sites. And as well, a couple nights earlier, there was images of ships burning in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. But yeah, as for the most recent attacks, hard to see what has really happened and who's telling the truth. It's really tough. If Saudi Arabia is using those very expensive interceptors, of which there is a limited supply, that is still a victory for the Houthis and for the Iranian aligned coalition. So even if the attacks didn't hit their mark, didn't set Aramco facilities on fire, and the Saudi Arabia was able to successfully shoot down those ballistic missiles using these very expensive anti-missile technologies, that's still, in the sum of things, a kind of a win for the Iranian-backed coalition, because the costs of those ballistic missiles is much lower than the costs of those anti-missile systems that bring them down.
And the Houthis are linking future attacks to demands like lifting restrictions on the international airport and the ports as well. How central are these issues to stalled peace processes? And is there any room for compromise as UN and Omani mediators are attempting to revive talks in Oman, given the latest escalation? How realistic of these chances of diplomacy even is there?
I think there's a realistic chance of diplomacy. It's just very confusing because what the stakes are is very opaque at this point. We're still not sure why Saudi Arabia began this round of escalation in the first place. Was it just really about one Iranian passenger plane, trying to land in Sana'a? Was there other dynamics at play? Is there a connection between what's happening in Yemen right now and what's happening in the Persian Gulf with the Iranians? Perhaps not, because what we saw in the most recent last couple days or so is the attacks winding down in the Persian Gulf just as they're heating up in the Red Sea and Saudi Arabia. Hey, thank you so much for listening. Again, I'm Borzu Daragahi. This is my podcast. It's called Badlands. You can subscribe at borzu.substack.com. Also, I'm on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and on YouTube.